Hey guys, welcome. Now, I'm going to be talking about this really rare super conjunction that is happening between April the 5th and 6th, although it does kind of linger because the planets are all moving rather slowly, the planets which are part of the super conjunction. I have analyzed it's very rare. I don't think this particular super conjunction has ever happened before, and I think it's going to have a huge bearing on politics this year particularly, and the next 3 years even. So I'm going to be talking about it. What is it? I'm going to explain right now. But firstly, I should say the last time I saw something this dramatic was when we had Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, and the North Node all in Capricorn during sort of 91, 92, 93, but particularly 91, when what happened? We had fall of Berlin Wall coming down, fall of apartheid. It was kind of a pivotal time. It was also just before the Rio Earth Summit, which sort of launched into net zero. And it was a pivotal stage for the European Union. Wasn't it kind of Maastricht or one of those important treaties to do with the EU was going on right then? So that is the only time that I say is fairly similar to this. So what we have on April 5th and 6th is Neptune, Saturn, the North Node, Mercury retrograde, and Venus retrograde all conjunct in Pisces. Now, I think this is extraordinary, and what it says to me is we should be analyzing exactly what the North Node in Pisces means, because this will magnify that. But I've also looked back in history to analyze the North Node and Saturn conjunctions and the North Node on Neptune conjunctions, and the results are really, really interesting. Just to mention quickly, there are lots of different themes. They can cover science, finances, but countries highlighted are Iraq, Iran, South Africa. Right. So I think this is really interesting. So probably the best way to start is by talking about what Neptune in Pisces, the North Node in Pisces means, because the North Node has been in Aries last year. It's kind of just gone into Pisces, and we should talk about that now. Let's first split it like this. The North Node signifies kind of a destiny, an unfoldment, the awakening, things we are moving towards on either a personal or a global level. So the South Node, which in this case would be in Virgo, the opposite side of Pisces, is what is being dissolved, what's being releasing, what's being let go. And the South Node is also a lot to do with kind of bad luck, bad karma, things that don't really work out, where things evolve more in the direction of the North Node. And the planets on the North Node are going to be particularly magnifying to it. Now, having Saturn and Neptune, I've already chatted about what the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries means and what Saturn-Neptune conjunctions mean in general, particularly in terms of communism. So you can recap that. There's one on my shorts, and there's also a long blurb I did about it on the video. And there's also this like confusing element of having Mercury retrograde and Venus retrograde there as well, which I think makes this whole thing like super interesting. So I think this year is going to be, well, we already said all along, hey, with all these planets in new signs, with Pluto now in Aquarius for the next 16, 18 years, Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries, Uranus is going to be moving into Gemini. I mean, it's all change, right? So we knew 2025 was going to be big, particularly for those of us who are looking towards 2030 and understanding the agenda that they're trying to move in. We know why. So the South Node is also kind of a phasing out. So what have we got in Virgo? Virgo represents manufacturing. And we know, particularly if you live in the UK, which we can use an example, net zero. It's decimating manufacturing. It's changing the whole setup of the UK. Electricity prices so high because of this boneheaded scheme of net zero, which is just pure virtue signaling, because the UK alone as a country can have no impact when China is increasing exponentially, and India and Africa, Saudi Arabia, their carbon production. So it's just mindless. But they've closed Port Talbot, they've closed Grangemouth, an oil refinery. We can see the dismantling of the infrastructure in the UK. Plus, there's a lot of decay as well, things becoming more and more run down. Look at what's going on with the councils going bankrupt, Thames Water is going bankrupt. Through the private and public sector, we now see increasing inefficiency. So it's just showing that the privatization of utilities didn't really work. But when you go to the councils, or what you would call the municipalities or whatever, they're failing to collect garbage. So there's a drop in hygiene. Hygiene also mentioned by Virgo. The water companies, although they charge us a fortune for water and the executives takes millions in bonuses, they're releasing all the effluent into the sea, into the rivers, polluting. There seems to be a total lack of the government's ability to control these or regulate, and costs are just going through the roof. So we see the breakdown in infrastructure. I saw a picture in Germany of a really modern power plant that had been constructed. I will put a picture over here, one of them over there, and show you it. And like it was constructed about 8 years ago, and they're already demolishing it for net zero. Right, crazy. And like I say as well, decline in health services. Obviously, the UK, massively increasing population, NHS can't keep up, huge strain on services. So Virgo represents health. We see a marked decline in health. Now, if you followed me for a long time and we've talked about various things like COVID era, there's another reason, of course, there's more and more pressure on health services. In many places, particularly my town, I think the population is surging. There are less doctor surgeries than there were sort of 30 years ago. The population was far lower. People can't get a dentist. So access to medical care in this country, which could be mirrored in other countries also, so to do with Virgo. Virgo is also the army. We know they're trying to conscript. It just isn't going to work. So many reasons. It's not only the lack of will, people on one foot, more people who are on the spectrum for various reasons. People are more likely to have chronic health conditions from a young age, obesity. So many reasons that it's going to be impossible to get the caliber of person. So this conscription is a non-starter. Not that I think anyone should be fighting any wars at the moment, because it's unnecessary and you're only fighting them for bankers. I've mentioned often the Cloud-Piven plan, which is to actually overwhelm the country through immigration and other ways to collapse things so they can be rebuilt in a different way. You can see this clearly happening in the UK as our systems and services, our transport networks, our roads, even with potholes, become totally overwhelmed. The government is not dealing with it. They've got boneheaded ideas of wind farms, which is basically a caveman technology, and solar panels on the beautiful green fields, which is satanic. I remember always that hymn I mentioned, Jerusalem, they talked about the dark satanic mills. Now it's the dark satanic solar panels, which is ridiculous. In South Africa, I have my complaints about the place with ANC, but where they've got their head screwed on, they put the solar panels on the top of industrial parks, on any new retail parks. You can see it on Google Maps and work it out. Even in North Korea, they put it in the middle of the motorway. So there are plenty of places to put them. You don't have to destroy the countryside. I mean, come on. So societal functioning breaking down as well, loss of social cohesion, loss of services. Yeah, I mean, look, they can't even pick the bins up. Loss of hygiene, I mentioned. They're saying huge rats in Birmingham and Southampton because the councils don't collect the bins anymore, right? Goes across the public and private sector. Now, also with the North Node in Pisces, we talked about North Node in Virgo. What about the North Node in Pisces? I'm noticing more and more people feeling very burnt out, feeling dissatisfied with the 9 to 5. So I think there's a societal shift within our consciousness that materialism is losing its appeal. There's only so much you can do, and people are feeling the need to check out of the 9 to 5 to perhaps move, seek a spiritual homeland, look for somewhere else where they're not in this rat race. So that represents a spiritual shift with the North Node in Pisces. What else do you have with North Node in Pisces? Dissolution of countries, which I'll come to in the examples. A blurring of political lines. Good example of this is George Galloway, obviously the Workers' Reform, which is a socialist party, Workers' Party. In the by-election that's going to take place in Runcorn, he's the most far right of the candidates. Now, he's not far right. He's been a virtual communist, right? But the spectrum's changed so much that his policies are further right than all the other candidates, including the Reform candidate, who's a woman who's previously been on refugees welcome junkets, which, if you know anything about Reform, the average Reform voter is totally against that sort of thing. So where they find these candidates. But I did see on a show that Zia Yusuf, who is the chairman of Reform, he has cleaned out all the grassroots activists and replaced them with his own in Reform. So similar to the Brexit Party, it's kind of get out all the people who believe in Brexit and have good intentions, want to get involved in politics, and bring in a whole lot of failed Tories or people with money to donate to the party. And we don't really care about the principles because Reform is really getting closer and closer to the uni party. Okay, this is going to be longer than I thought, so let's pause there.